I'm excited to introduce my guest of today's show. I met Monica Moody, gosh, I don't know, maybe in 2007 or something. We were both guests on the Rachael Ray Show, and we have stayed in touch all this time. And through the invention of Facebook and other social media, we reconnected a few years back. And Monica, I have to say, you're one of my favorite reconnections in the social media world.
Likewise, Lisa, for sure. Yeah.
That was when we met. We were both, as I said, on the Rachael Ray Show. There was an episode about entrepreneurial moms, and we were both in different businesses at the time. And I wanted to just kind of start there because it's all part of the transformation to you becoming an author. Your book is being released on April 27th. Be Yourself to Free Yourself. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I have been so looking forward to this conversation. So thank you.
Well, we have stayed in touch over the years, and that's been a real bonus in my life to stay in touch with you. When we met, you were doing home spa parties, and that was how you were invited to the Rachael Ray Show. So talk about that a bit and where you were in your life when we met, and that was about 2007, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe it was about that time. And, of course, it feels like a lifetime ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I just, I'll come across something, maybe a brochure or something from that time period. I'm just like, wow. But yeah, so I was leading a company where we did mobile spa events, both for private parties for women and girls. And then we also did corporate parties as well. And so we come into a space and we just transform it into a spa. I had a lot of, probably about 75 technicians that worked with me at that time. And from massage therapists to makeup artists and nutritionists, like we provided all of the services. And it was great. I mean, it was so much fun. And then and what I didn't realize at the time that we were on Rachael Ray was, I think I was in business for maybe about a year after that. So I didn't even realize at the time that it would be soon coming to a close.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you as well, is when you were doing that business, it seemed to me, I hadn't heard of people doing what you were doing. It seemed to me that it was an original idea, but it was also difficult to duplicate unless you were going to franchise it or something, which would be difficult to do as well. And so was that something that you'd come up with on your own? Had you seen it somewhere, or was that just the entrepreneur in you?
At this point, I can't even remember what the initial impetus was. My youngest daughter was maybe 2 at the time. So I was working, well, I was at home. I wasn't working, but I knew I wanted to do something and I wanted to give in some way. And so this spa party idea just kind of seemed to come from nowhere. And at the time, there were a few companies that were doing it throughout the US, mostly for celebrity types. And so my thought was, well, what if we bring this to the people? And like I said, it was great, but it wasn't sustainable, not in the way that I was doing it anyway.
One thing too that I will say is, I think that you and I talked about this later, and if we didn't, we can now, but the company that I had at the time was also not like my passion, what I wanted to do with my whole life kind of thing, and I think about the time after we were on the shows, when the recession came and the business that I was in, shipping became very expensive to ship our product. There were all these hurdles to get over. And I just wasn't that interested in fighting those hurdles the way someone might be if they were really passionate about what they were doing. So I think that that's kind of what you faced as well, is like this filled a gap, but was it really your calling? And you struggled with that at the time, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Because what was happening behind the scenes during this time, and I would say it was a period of that maybe launched maybe around 2005, 2006, I was going through this significant spiritual transformation, personal transformation, whatever term you want to use. And so all the things that I was learning, I was really eager to not just live it, but I felt this call to share and to teach. And so even with the spa parties, there was this period where I had like this red flag moment, like, well, what if I tried to incorporate some personal development elements into the events that we were hosting? And we tried in certain ways, but it just never took off in the way that I imagined. And then soon thereafter, due to, like you said, just a lot of hurdles, um, I think it was in 2008 that I just decided, okay, yeah, we're going to close this baby down. And so it was beautiful for what it was, but it wasn't the direction that I knew I needed to head in.
And that's the thing about listening to that voice, right? When something just seems off. And you and I were on very similar trajectories, because in 2008 is when I started doing my radio show.
Yeah.
And it became about the same thing. Like, here are the things that I've learned, and what of that can I share? So let's take a break. When we come back, let's dive a little deeper into that transition for you from spa parties on a national television show. So we were both doing pretty good. We were both doing pretty good. And we opted out of those, both of those roles in our careers, and ended up where we are now. So I just want to talk more with the audience about the choices that you made and how they've led you to your first book. This is your first book. Are you so excited?
Beyond excited. Yes.
We were messaging each other when you were going off to take some writing time for yourself. So I'm really proud of you to see it through, because I get asked a lot of times, how do you write a book? Well, you just start writing.
You just start writing.
So let's take a quick break. We're talking with Monica Moody. Her book is available April 27th. Be yourself to free yourself. I got those two mixed around. We'll be back in just a moment. Hi, we're back. We're talking with Monica Moody. I first met her, we figured out, in about 2007 when we were both guests on the Rachael Ray Show as entrepreneurial moms. At the time, she owned and operated a home spa party, and was feeling called to do something a little bit different, wanting to teach and share, which has led to her new book, her first book, titled Be Yourself to Free Yourself. It's released on April 27th. Thanks again for being here. We're going to get to the book, which is an exciting part of this conversation. But I also wanted to talk about the transition that you went through in your career that led you to the book, and also the coaching and things that you felt called to do. So you decided in 2008 that you were going to make a change and put an end to the spa party company. And what came next for you, and how can you explain how you got there?
Yeah, so I shut down the spa party business because, as we were just saying, just certain elements were just not working. It was taking a physical toll, and lots of details that we won't go into. But I had to figure out what was next. And so all this time, I'm sort of feeling the pull to do the personal development work, to start. And there were some things that I felt the pull to do that I didn't even really have a term for it. I remember my first vision board and seeing the word life coach in like an Oprah magazine. I was like, sounds interesting. And I cut it out and I put it on my vision board, not even fully understanding what it was. So in 2008, I actually ended up returning back to higher education, because that's what I had done prior to the spa party business. So through this, I won't give the details for the sake of time, but I ended up landing a role as director of career services for a women's college. And it was not something I applied for, I will say that much, but it was something that was offered to me. And so we really have to watch for those moments, right? When things just kind of land in your lap, because there's usually a lot more going on behind the scenes. So I said yes, and I started helping young women, figure out what they wanted to do with their lives. And simultaneously, I'm still doing my own personal transformation work. And so I ended up signing up for this program to become a life coach, and more specifically, a life coach and a life purpose and career coach. And that's really when things started to get very interesting, right? And so I was with the college for about 3 years. And during that time, I started doing a little bit of training as a consultant, and I started coaching on the side. And I did it. So I worked for the college for about 3 years, but then in 2011, I was like, no, I'm ready to do this full time, because I enjoyed it so. So I quit my job and started coaching and training full time.
Was quitting your job was that a big sacrifice in your life? Was it a big decision? Was it a financial decision? What, you know, was there risk involved in doing that?
There was so much risk, Lisa, and that's one of the things that I spotlight in the book, because I want my readers to understand that, you know, and we talk about this in different ways, but you know, usually like there's this, we want this path from A to B, and we want it to be clean and clear and perfect, and it's never that, right? And so the short version of the story behind my quitting my job in 2011 was, I mentioned that I was on the spiritual path and just eager to get out there and teach the concepts. Well, my husband was on the same path, you know, in his own way. We were learning and growing together. He's an educator. And so he wanted to take the principles that we were learning and basically take them to the next generation of teachers, more of a spiritual approach to teaching our kids. So he quit his job first. Literally a day or so later, I announced, well, you know what? I'm going to quit my job too.
You can quit, I can quit.
Hey, let's all quit the jobs. And I laugh about it because what usually I tell this story in some of my trainings, and usually the looks on the folks' faces in the classroom tells it all. They're like, oh my gosh, really? And yeah, it was just as devastating as you're probably thinking. You know, we both fell flat on our faces, and a different kind of journey sort of started at that point. Yeah.
And how long did it take for you making that decision, falling flat on your face, to realizing that it was in fact the best decision you could have made? You know, you can't, hopefully you didn't necessarily get to this point right this minute writing the book and seeing all of this come to fruition, because you've had a lot of success between then and now. But what, for some people watching who have thought about changing their path, what about it, your path and your change? When did you kind of have the light bulb moment that, yeah, this is working, I did the right thing?
Yeah, you know, and that's such a great question, Lisa, because I think, and you're right, I've had success for me. Of course, we would have to define what that means and what that looks like for each one of us. But I would say that my career, my life has been tremendously successful. And yet there are still times even today when, you know, I'm like, okay, well, what is next? What, you know, and you question and you doubt, right? And so I want to make that point so clear that you never arrive, so to speak. I think that's what I'm trying to say. But from the point at which we, you know, both quit our jobs, and we had what I refer to in the book as the desert years. And it lasted for several years where we were just simply trying to find our way. We were trying to make sense of what the choices that we had made. Because one of the things that trips us up is, for example, in the case of me and my husband, we both would say that we felt divinely guided to make those choices, right? To quit our jobs. So when we make those kinds of decisions, but things don't end up panning out the way that we expect, then we start to second guess what we heard. And so it took a long time. And my husband is still trying to sort through things, right?
Yeah, I think sometimes that when we are entrepreneurial, we can get really loud in our own head, right? Start leaning on our own understanding. And we can make our voice sound like anything. We can make God's voice sound like anything we wanted to say, right?
Yeah.
And then, right, if everything goes smoothly, you're like, oh, well, that's the voice I heard. And then then you have to start to think, well, was I listening correctly, or was I listening at all?
Exactly. And we went through that process, and it took a few years for me to get to the place where I stopped second guessing it. And the understanding that I carried at that point was, yeah, this was what the journey that I needed to take, but not for the reasons that I thought I was taking it, right? So it wasn't for me to be catapulted to this place of success where, you know, I was living the dream and the vision, but there were things that I needed to learn along that path that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So it, you know, ended up being an amazing experience in so many ways.
We'll talk more with Monica Moody when we come back. Her book is titled Be Yourself to Free Yourself. So many times people think about writing a book and wanting to share their story. It's no easy task. So congratulations are in order. We'll be back with more details about her book in just a moment. We're talking with Monica Moody. She's the author of the new book titled Be Yourself to Free Yourself. We were talking earlier in the show about the different path that we go along, not knowing how we get from point A to point B, and let alone Z, wherever that ends up being, right?
Right.
So had you always wanted to write a book? Was that part of the thing that you wanted to incorporate in your teaching and sharing, or is that something that came along as you traveled that journey of teaching?
I think from like the initial points when I started to what I call awaken, like when you become conscious of the life that you're living and the choices that you're making, um, I sensed that everything that I was learning, like I knew it wasn't just for me, right? It was like this background awareness where I almost imagined myself at some point teaching and sharing. And so I documented my journey along the way, a lot of journaling, a lot of just spotlighting the process of what worked and what was moving me forward. And so at a point, it was a clear knowing and a clear understanding that, yeah, this has to be documented in the way of a book. And because I had all of these, I guess the best way to describe it is like there are these pieces of my heart that would not rest until they made it into something concrete that could be shared.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, and so the book just, and I honestly believe it was born through me. I don't, I mean, there's this process that I go through where I know when something is coming through me versus when my head is creating, and this book came through me.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and I said earlier how we have to be okay with whatever money comes from a book, because sometimes it's only the big time authors that make money. But at the same time, there is abundance in it no matter how it comes to you, right? There is abundance in when you sit in the back of a room, when you've given a talk, whether you sign 20 books or 200 books, it means something to hand those words over to someone who might be changed by them.
yeah, absolutely. And I think the excitement that I'm feeling right now is because I know that the book came through me, I also know that it has a lot of power.
Mhm.
And I trust in that power, and I trust that it will get to wherever it's supposed to be in terms of being in the hands of the readers. You know, whoever is supposed to connect with this book will. And so I can release it, and I can, I can sit back and have that sense of joy and gratitude that I was invited to be a part of the process.
And it is gratitude, because what I often say is that people have dedicated their time. People have dedicated their time, energy, and empathy to my family's story. 382 pages worth of that time and energy is devoted to reading the words that I wrote. And all you can do is hope that somebody appreciates that and is moved by it and impacts them in some way. For people who are watching, your book is called Be Yourself to Free Yourself. What do you want to tell them about the book, your elevator story about the book?
So, I've had a few people to ask me like, okay, what's the essence of it? What is it about? What is the book about? And I think, when I truly sat with them, it's like, okay, how can I drill this down to just a few words? And the best thing I can come up with is it's a journey towards grace. It is a journey towards grace. The book is, there are 4 parts to the book. And again, it's about the process that I stepped into that led me to my own personal transformation. And at a point, because I witnessed the power of this model, I started offering it to my clients. I started using it in my trainings, and I could see the impact that it was having on folks' lives. And so the 4 parts of the book are awaken, align, flow, and love. And it's like, what do those elements look like when we are living them? And so it's a lot. So I share, parts of my story. as I'm entering in and out of the different phases. And I share all the wisdom that I could channel in terms of um, advice and guidance offered to the reader on how they too could navigate that path. And so love is the final part. And it was really important for me when I was writing that section of the book that I wanted to give practical guidance on what love looks like when you are living it. So there's a chapter on love at work. There's a chapter on love and parenting, love and social justice activism. Like, what does it look like when we're being loved? And that was probably my favorite part to write.
Yeah, so we're not talking about necessarily love and like with your partner and your spouse and your relationships, but if we are love, then how do we share that? And how does that come across, right? Because there are some people we know that think they exude love, yet when put in an uncomfortable situation, you see another side to them. So it really is a practice to like I always say, you know, people can get along just fine when everything's going along just fine. But how do you get along with that person in your life or in your family or in your friendships or your coworker when the going gets rough? That's when your true colors show through, right? That's when you really get to know yourself and the people around you.
Yep, absolutely. And I would say that one of the like core principles behind the entire book is this awareness or this understanding that the world is simply reflecting who we are choosing to be, whether personally or collectively. And so in that sense, we have a whole lot more power than we understand typically to change our own lives and to change the world. And so I think the book could be considered as a guide on how to make that transformation so that your personal life shifts and so that as our collective starts to shift as well because of who we are choosing to be. Like you said, choosing that state of love and just the power that comes from that.
Well, I think people have so much that they can learn from you. And I'm so grateful that you took the time and energy and all that it takes to sit down and write the words and rewrite the words. Where can people find the book?
So the book is available on Amazon, and soon, in a few weeks, will be available in a lot of other different places. So, you know, Google "Be Yourself" to free yourself on Amazon and put my name in there, Monica Moody, and you are sure to find it. So.
Well, congratulations again. I'm so grateful to have you here, and I hope when things open up again, we can see each other. It's been way too long.
I know. Thank you so much, Lisa. This was as fun as I imagined. I appreciate it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.